Well, it is Shavuot, and I want to share a lesson with you that I think is particularly timely for the season we're in right now, not just as a congregation, but as a society, as the world in general. And so let me uh, let me just turn to my notes here quickly. There we go. And I want to talk with you about how to find God while you're in the midbar. Finding God in the Midbar. That's what I want to talk about with you a little. And of course, Shavuot began as an agricultural festival celebrating the wheat harvest, which would come in. But the way Judaism works, and really any Christianity as well, is that over the centuries, layers and layers are built upon meanings and thoughts. And this is, we believe, God superintending this process where new meanings and new ideas and perspectives are added to one another. And they're not opposite each other, they're just different, and they reflect our journey, the journey of Israel through the centuries. In a sense, we could say the Bible is a carried book. We carry it with us, and inevitably, as time goes on, new additions are made, new thoughts, which God gives us through the experience of our people. So it began as an agricultural festival, but along the way, it became a celebration of course, the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. Now, here's the question, or one question I want to ask you. Was the Torah given in the middle of a bustling, hustling city with lots of action and subways and easy transportation to get to it? Or was it given somewhere else? Where was it given? Not in a busy place. That's a little. Well, where was it given? In the wilderness, in the Midbar. In the Midbar. We'll talk about that word Midbar a little later. But the Torah was not given in a place of security and plenty and abundance and predictability and everything being normal and you knew what was coming next, which is what, living in a normal situation, you expect a lot of continuity, but it wasn't that way. It was given in the wilderness because it's in the wilderness where we can sometimes find God and find ourselves at a level that we couldn't during the normal rhythm of life. And the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement, he understood this very well. It's actually quite a common theme in Jewish thinking. But the Baal Shem Tov noted that the Midbar experience, which has 40 different stopping places, 40 different places we stop, 42, I'm sorry, that these 42 different experiences along the way from Egypt and then all the way to the Promised Land represented 42 different stages that each person goes through. And it's a very clever calculation where each stage of the journey is representative of the journey through life from infancy to the end, really. So we have this idea of the Midbar being a place of stripping down, a place that is not the usual. It's a place of sometimes tremendous challenge, and it is a place, however, where certain things occur that are very difficult to occur in other contexts. So let's think again about Yeshua. Let's think about him in the Midbar. When was Yeshua specifically in the Midbar? Can anyone tell us? I'm sorry? Yes, when he was tempted. Remember, before he was able to begin his public work in Israel, he had to experience the Midbar, the wilderness. And if you've been in the Judean wilderness, which looks pretty much now the way it did a long time ago, it is very barren. You are stripped down to nothing. There is nothing there. You are just by yourself. And all the sense experience and all the stuff that we're used to when we're with people and in normal life, they're just gone. So it was in the Midbar that Yeshua experienced something, in this case, the temptation by the evil one, tempting him to do things that would be contrary to the things God would have him do as the Mashiach, make atonement for us, ultimately receive his kingdom. But it was in the Midbar. It was that stripping down experience. And so Yeshua, who we often call the one-man Israel, recapitulates in his own life the wilderness experience, 40 days, analogous to the 40 years that we spent in the wilderness, where God shaped us as well. I had a very interesting wilderness experience I want to tell you about. Many years ago, Russ Resnick, Rabbi Russ, many of you know Rabbi Russ, he and I went to the White Sands of New Mexico. Has anyone ever been to the White Sands? Okay. It is like outer space. The crystalline structure of the sand is so reflective that everything is white and blinding. And when we were there, we got out of the car and just walked a short distance, and you can't understand the spatial relationships. Is that hill nearby, or is it far away? How far is it to another object? You can't tell, and it is utterly disorienting. The White Sands, they have a big national park, but also it was a missile testing ground for during the Cold War era. But it is weird because you are just disoriented, and disorientation is part of what a midbar experience is all about. Now, again, in the midbar, you're stripped down. There's no distractions. Here's something. You're utterly vulnerable. And there are no social props and no people around. You've just got to be in the midbar yourself. But there's a reason for it. But sometimes we have midbar experiences. Some short, some can be a lot longer than we would like. In the midbar, we can hear the davar. Now let me explain these two words. Midbar, if you take away the first letter, mem, you get, what's the word you get? Davar. And what does word davar mean? The word. And here's the thing about the midbar. It's in the midbar that our people heard the davar. That is, it was in that stripped down state, wandering through the desert, not knowing how things were going to turn out exactly. It was in that environment, totally foreign to everything we were used to. It was in that environment, that stripped down environment, that God gave us the Devar, in this case, the Ten Commandments. And so the wilderness and the word, they're related to each other, and it's not contrived. It's real. It's really there. In the Midbar, we hear the word. In the desert, we hear the Devar. Now, the big point is that revelation, God's truth to us, can come most powerfully during our Midbar experiences. They're not the only times he speaks to us, but there is a special character to the Midbar experience that we really ought to give some attention to. Now, let's share an example that this is not a personal example, but this is one that society, that we can observe from society. Have you heard of the Jesus Revolution? Familiar? How many of you remember it? I remember it very well. A lot of you don't. You were little kids, right? Or you were a twinkle in your parents' eye. You weren't born yet. Okay, so the Jesus Revolution was a time in the late 1960s and early 70s when thousands upon thousands of young people came to embrace Yeshua. And it was an amazing moment. I remember it well. And there was a Messianic Jewish element in it, which I'll talk about in a minute. But you see, that great turning to God during that time didn't happen out of the blue. It's not as if God said just to a few angels, listen, I want you to just reveal things for me. No, it wasn't quite so simple and direct. As a matter of fact, in many ways, America was in a Midbar experience. Let me describe it quickly. The key thing, and I think this really kicked it off, was the death of John F. Kennedy Jr. in November 22nd, 1963. I remember the day well. My teacher made me stand outside the room because I was being a bad boy, and Andrew Hugel came along. He was the class clown. I don't know what he was doing outside the room, but he came up to me and said, the president's been shot. I said, come on, are you kidding? Well, lo and behold, it's true. It has been said that America lost her innocence at that moment. In other words, we had been through the 50s and, the pleasant post-World War II economic expansion and people moving to California and everything seemed groovy and there was Elvis and, all this good stuff. And problems in public schools were, and there's actually documents about this, in public schools, the problems were kids eating bubble gum or, chewing bubble gum and not throwing paper in the waste paper baskets. I mean, the society was relatively innocent at that time. But 1968, the death of Martin Luther King and also Bobby Kennedy was assassinated at that time. And another aspect of the Midbar experience in America at that time was the Vietnam War. By 1969, 500,000 soldiers, military personnel, were stationed in Vietnam. And there were huge demonstrations because a lot of people felt that this was an unjustified war. And a lot of people were hurt, a lot of Americans were hurt. So it was a time of tremendous dislocation, disorientation. The world that we thought was our world, where America ruled and everything was just going swimmingly and et cetera, et cetera. No, and we could add other things, the other Cold War dimensions. But I'm just trying to give you a sense that I believe that the Jesus Revolution and resulting modern Messianic Judaism did not come out of the blue, but to some extent was a function of the wilderness experience with its sense of social dislocation and confusion and all that. All these things contributed. And from a Messianic Jewish standpoint, there's one event that really typifies what I'm trying to say. And that was the June 1967 war, where 5 Arab armies armed and attacked Israel, and Israel won the war. But let me tell you, that was some scary moment. And yet, out of that Midbar experience, if you will, that sense of, oy vey, what's going to be, as this war occurred, which was so potentially destructive. I mean, the nation could have been wiped out, really could have. Out of that, you had thousands, hundreds, I don't know the exact numbers, but a lot of young Jewish people, including myself, saying, hey, listen, we almost got wiped out. We were assimilating into modern American culture. We didn't care very much. And then when the 67 war came, all of a sudden there was a real groundswell of Jewish self-identification. And I have to admit a certain pride at, having beaten back all these armies and all. But really, it was at that time, through those other things that I mentioned, and through this moment, that birthed the revelation, the davar. The word came, hey, we need synagogues where Yeshua is represented. We do not want to assimilate because our identity was threatened, and this is important that we continue. And the word, the davar, came to us, and that's why we're all here today, really. And that's not an exaggeration. There is a direct historical link. It was the Midbar experience in America that gave rise to this phenomenal movement of young people embracing Yeshua and also the Messianic Jewish movement. Now, I'll share a personal experience along these lines. Something happened in December 1970 that, let's just say, catapulted me into a Midbar experience. And the deal is this. Up to that point, through junior high school and high school, and then beginning college, my whole identity was the trombone. You know what I mean? The trombone. That was the thing. Now it's not the trombone. I think we got it more healthy right now. It's not the flute, but both of those are nice. Now, in December of 1970, and this was at the end of the first semester of my freshman year, all the brass players in the music school had to appear, all the musicians had to appear before the faculty in their particular area, woodwind, strings, percussion, brass, and you had to play in front of your teacher and all the others. So, all the professors would sit behind a table, and you would come in and you would play scales, you'd play exercises, you'd have a solo ready to go. I remember the day. It was a freezing, cold, biting, windy morning in Ithaca, New York. And I remember it was so cold, and my lips were chapped. And I'm in the practice room at 6 a.m. or so, getting ready for this jury exam. I sounded horrible. I mean, bad. And I'm practicing and trying to get things going and the sound good and the notes and the articulation. And I show up for my jury exam, and there are the others, teachers, Mr. Brown, my teacher, and the other teachers. Okay, play, kid. That type of thing. I want to tell you, I sounded like a moderately talented fifth grader. It was horrible. I was horrible. And up to that point, I had, everyone thought I was such hot stuff at jazz, wanted a scholarship to Berkeley School of Music as a junior in high school, and I thought I was such hot stuff. Well, let me tell you, at my next lesson, tall, Southern accented Mr. Brown puts his hand on my shoulder and says, "Rich, I hate to say this, but we're going to have to put you on academic probation." Me? I thought I was a hotshot. I thought I was, and all of a sudden, if I don't get better, I'm out, and my dreams come in my mind, would come crashing down. Can you experience that with me for a second as a Midbar experience? Was it disorienting? You better believe it. Did I feel alone? You better believe it. And all of the negative emotions that you want to bring, fear and everything, it all welled up for 18-year-old me. Well, I decided I wasn't going to give up, and I studied studied real hard, and ended up in Ocean City, New Jersey, and I won't go into all the details now, but that's where I became a believer in Yeshua. And I'm telling you, had I not had that Midbar experience, both providentially in terms of where I would have ended up, because I wouldn't have gone to Ocean City to study with my teacher, I would have just had fun during the summer. All of that, plus the absolute deflating nature of the Midbar experience, I think is part of what God used to open me up when my friend John Fisher said, consider becoming a follower of Yeshua. And I said, absolutely. Now, it wasn't just that event. I don't want to present an unrealistic picture, but it was a contributing factor for sure. You get cut down a few notches, you have a Midbar experience, and you're left with a choice. What am I going to do? And what I decided to do was to follow the Holy One. Okay? So, amidst the sense of disorientation, the Midbar, the Devar comes. Now, last, I just want to talk a little bit more about the Midbar moment that I believe that our society is in right now. And I'm not going to describe it, but I think we can all feel it. We are in a really unique moment in American and world history when you think of all the different challenges that are coming our way now. I believe that this is a Midbar moment for us as a society, and I believe that God is going to use it as he did the time in the 60s and that I described earlier. I believe there is going to be a great outpouring of his Ruach in this world. I believe it's coming because I believe that God really cares about the world, loves all mankind, specifically loves to bless the world through his people Israel. That's the covenantal framework. And I believe that this Midbar moment will result in an unexpected word which will begin a spiritual rejuvenation, and I think rejuvenation of other kinds that we'll see. It is a prophetic sense I have. If I'm wrong, I'll apologize. But if I'm right, we'll all dance the horror together. This is a tough moment. But here's the point. Shavuot started out as a celebration of the wheat harvest in Eretz Yisrael, which we talked about. But before the blessing of being in the land, of finally getting in to experience that wonderful harvest, the barrenness of the Midbar experience had to happen first. And if you are willing to see your personal Midbar experiences as an opportunity to hear the word, then let me share this word to you, spoken by Yeshua and recorded by Yochanan, who gave us the book of the Revelation. Here I am, Yeshua said. I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and eat with that person and they with me. He's speaking to us, offering us that opportunity all the time, but I think most poignantly and particularly during our Midbar experience. So Shavuot is a happy day, and we start celebrating tonight, and it's a happy time. It's a time of rejoicing. May the wonderful potential of the Midbar moment fill you with anticipation for their hidden blessings, for you personally, for Israel, and for our entire world. Shabbat Shalom.